Today's ghost story episode is a series of stories told by a young man. These strange experiences followed him from his childhood in the countryside all the way until he moved to Can Tho to live and study. As for what happened in these stories, let's get into them now. This young man was from Bac Lieu and had been living and studying in Can Tho for about 6 years. One thing I should mention is that the stories he shared today are not extremely terrifying. However, they are the kind of stories that make you wonder whether there really is a parallel world, an invisible realm belonging to spirits. These events followed him from childhood to adulthood. Even after moving to Can Tho for university, he still encountered supernatural experiences. His first story happened when he was still living in his old house in Bac Lieu. In his hometown, there was something people called a lane. It was a small road branching off from a main road. From the entrance of that lane, you still had to travel several kilometers before reaching his house. His family lived deep inside this lane. Whenever he wanted to go home, he had to leave the main road and travel several more kilometers. The road leading home was very deserted. On both sides were only rice fields with no houses at all. There was also a long row of eucalyptus trees. Between those trees were several graves. Alongside the road ran a river, and near the riverbank grew many wild apple trees. Back in around 2007 or so, the road had no streetlights. At night, it was completely dark. Because of that, whenever he went out late, he hardly dared to return home alone. Usually he would ask an adult to take him back from the main road. Otherwise, he would wait there until someone happened to be heading in that direction and follow them. If nobody came, he would ask his grandmother to come and get him because she lived near the main road. The path home was incredibly lonely. When he was a child, he often got frightened along that road, though usually it was nothing too serious. For example, some nights he would challenge himself to walk home late. There would be no wind at all, yet the leaves would suddenly shake. Sometimes, while walking, he would hear stones being thrown from ahead of him. Other times, while riding home after playing games, he would catch glimpses of a shadow darting past behind him. Still, none of those incidents left much of an impression on him. He had been frightened many times before. However, there was one incident in 2008 that stood out as the most terrifying experience of his life. Near the entrance of the lane, close to the main road, lived his relative, Aunt Six. Aunt Six had a 5-year-old son who had recently passed away from heart disease. Their house was located right beside the eucalyptus grove. Coincidentally, this grove was on the road he used every day to get home. Since the boy often came over to play, all the children in the neighborhood knew him well. When he died, everyone was saddened. After the boy passed away, his parents no longer allowed him to visit that house. For about a month, he was too scared to walk alone along that stretch of road. As time passed, however, things gradually settled down and he became less afraid. One evening, he was returning home alone along that road. He was still nervous, but then he noticed a Honda motorcycle ahead. He planned to follow it, so he wouldn't feel so scared. Unfortunately, the motorcycle sped off and disappeared into the distance, leaving him alone again. Since he didn't mention his name, I'll call him Mr. D. At that moment, Mr. D was hurrying along, breathing heavily because he was so frightened. Then suddenly, he heard a child's voice beside his ear. "Mr. D, where are you going? Why are you so handsome today?" He immediately stopped and looked around. There was nobody there, but then he realized something. That voice sounded familiar. He had definitely heard it before. The moment he remembered where he knew that voice from, he turned and ran as fast as he could toward home. Yet the voice continued calling him from behind. Eventually, he glanced back toward the eucalyptus grove where the little boy had been buried, and there, standing right beside the grave, was a child. From that day onward, he never dared to travel that road late at night again. Another incident happened when he and his older sister were sleeping in the same room. In the middle of the night, his sister suddenly began screaming and crying uncontrollably. When he looked at the clock, it was only 1 a.m. Her cries were so loud that he woke up immediately, and so did their parents. Their parents rushed over and asked why she was crying so badly. His sister said that she had seen a whole group of children outside the window. They were pulling at her legs, trying to drag her out through the window. According to her, there were many of them. Their bodies were soaking wet. Their faces were pale white. They looked incredibly resentful and frightening. Back then, houses in the countryside did not have separate bedrooms. His parents slept near the kitchen, while he and his sister slept in the front room. The front room was right next to the window. Seeing how terrified she was, their parents told both of them to move into the kitchen and sleep with them. After the incident with the dead boy on the road and this terrifying encounter, his parents began wondering why their family kept seeing ghostly children. Eventually, they decided to visit a spiritual master. When they arrived, the master told them that the land their house stood on had once been a place where many unidentified drowned bodies washed ashore. Among them were numerous children. Because the family had never known this history, they had never performed any offerings for those spirits. According to the master, that was why the spirits kept returning to disturb them. His parents were frightened and invited the master to perform rituals and spirit cleansing ceremonies. However, nothing worked. There were simply too many wandering spirits. Most of them had died a very long time ago. The master was unable to deal with them. After that, the disturbances only grew worse. Around that period, his parents constantly argued. Their business suffered losses. He and his sister became sick repeatedly. Sometimes both children would be hospitalized at the same time. The family felt as if they were being relentlessly troubled. Finally, around the beginning of 2011, because of family difficulties, they moved away from that house and relocated next to his grandmother's home. The old house was rented out to people who used it as a resting place while raising free-range ducks. Yet, strangely, nobody could stay there for long. Every tenant claimed they were driven away by something. The bravest ones could endure about a month. Others left after only a few days. After the family moved out, the property became overgrown with weeds and trees. The entire place looked gloomy and abandoned. Fortunately, after relocating beside his grandmother's house, the family no longer experienced serious supernatural disturbances. However, one strange matter continued right up to the present day. On his father's side of the family, all the relatives lived close together. Near the house of Aunt Five stood an old coconut tree. According to him, that tree was at least twice as old as he was. The elders in the family believed that two spirits lived there. One was a child spirit that stayed near the top of the tree. The other was an old spirit that hid beneath the floor of Aunt Five's still house. Because Aunt Five practiced under the guidance of a spiritual master, her house contained many altars and sacred objects. As a result, despite being close to the river and the road, her family remained safe and peaceful. Now, his grandmother once had a third son, whom everyone called Uncle Three. Uncle Three died when he was still very young during a period of war and chaos. Because of the circumstances, he was never properly buried, and even the location of his grave had long been lost. Every year, Uncle Three's spirit was said to possess Aunt Five, or the youngest aunt, whenever the family held ceremonies and forgot to offer food to him. Since he had no altar of his own, family members usually only needed to make a small offering and pray. One time, during a memorial ceremony, the family forgot him. Immediately afterward, Uncle Three supposedly possessed someone and began demanding food. Since everyone was already familiar with these occurrences, they simply apologized and prepared offerings. After receiving them, the spirit calmed down. Over the years, these possessions became so common that nobody in the family was afraid anymore. They had grown used to it. Every year, Uncle Three would come back again. However, one occasion was more serious than usual. During another memorial ceremony, his grandmother once again forgot to prepare offerings for Uncle Three. This time, Aunt Five was in the kitchen, so the spirit could not possess her. Instead, it entered the body of the youngest aunt. She cried uncontrollably and repeatedly demanded food. Since this happened almost every year, Uncle Eight, who was Uncle Three's younger brother, finally became annoyed. He said, "Why do you act like a child every year? We'll offer food to you soon. Why make such a fuss?" The spirit became furious. It remained inside the youngest aunt's body for 3 entire hours and refused to leave. Only after the family repeatedly apologized did it finally release her. Another time, there wasn't even a ceremony. Uncle Three simply decided to appear. He possessed one of the uncles and announced that he had come to warn the family about something. Everyone asked what it was. The spirit replied, "Earlier I tried to enter Aunt Five. Aunt Five's real name was Twee, but she came home too quickly, and I couldn't catch up. When I reached her house, there were so many guardian deities standing in front that they wouldn't let me enter." Then the spirit said something alarming. "Under Aunt Twee's house, near the river, there's an old evil spirit living beneath the floor. Tell her to be careful." As soon as he finished speaking, the possession ended. The family was deeply worried. Although they had long suspected that something lived beneath Aunt Five's house, this warning made them take the matter more seriously. Aunt Five asked her spiritual teacher for protective talismans and placed them around the house. For a while, everything seemed peaceful, but it didn't last long. Not long after that, another strange incident occurred. During the Lunar New Year, his great-grandmother lost an earring. 7 or 8 family members searched everywhere for it, but couldn't find it. Then Aunt Five suddenly began acting strangely, as if she had been possessed. She walked angrily from the front of the house toward Uncle Seven's house. After entering, she told Uncle Seven to bring the missing earring out in front of everyone. Then she laughed loudly and said, "During Tet, I saw all of you having so much fun, so I took the youngest aunt's earring and hid it." Everyone immediately realized that Uncle Three had returned. After all, the entire family had searched 4 or 5 times without success. Yet somehow the spirit knew exactly where it was. Now, let's return to the story of the 2 spirits living near the coconut tree beside Aunt Five's house. About 3 or 4 years ago, there was an empty area behind his grandmother's house where everyone used to dump garbage. Eventually, that area was filled in, so people began throwing trash near the base of the coconut tree instead. When enough garbage accumulated, they would gather it together and burn it. After all, in the countryside there were no garbage trucks collecting waste. One day, the youngest ant went down to throw away some trash. As she was walking back toward the house, she suddenly collapsed. The family rushed over. They found her body completely stiff. Her arms and legs were tightly locked together. Several men tried to separate them, but couldn't. Everyone became frightened. Ant 5 quickly burned incense and prayed to the ancestors. After some time, the youngest ant calmed down and her limbs relaxed. However, she wasn't truly conscious. She had been possessed. The family believed one of the spirits from beneath the coconut tree had entered her body. His father asked, "Who are you? If we've done something wrong, tell us." The possessed ant began crying. Her voice sounded exactly like a child. It said, "I've lived beneath this coconut tree for many years. Why do you keep throwing garbage here? It's filthy, hot, and unbearable." As soon as it finished speaking, the spirit left. After that incident, the family stopped dumping trash near the coconut tree. Sometime later, however, the youngest ant left home to work on a barge and only returned occasionally. One day after coming home, she went out to throw away some garbage. This time she avoided the tree. But the pile of trash had grown so large that part of it had spread close to the coconut tree again. That very day, she was possessed once more. She cried and screamed continuously, yet the spirit refused to enter the house. It said there were too many sacred beings and Buddhist deities inside. Instead, it remained outside crying. When the family asked what was wrong, it said, "Why do you keep throwing garbage where I live?" At that moment, Uncle 8, who had the hottest temper in the family, finally lost patience. Seeing the youngest ant repeatedly possessed, he shouted, "If you keep causing trouble, I'll have you taken to a temple." Then he added, "And if you don't listen, I'll burn down your house." The spirit suddenly opened its eyes wide and replied, "Take me to a temple if you want. But if you don't, that old spirit under Ant 5's house will kill all your descendants." As it spoke, it pointed beneath Ant 5's still house. Then it continued, "That old spirit doesn't dare come near your house because your ancestors protect it. But if any of your grandchildren wander near that still house by the river, it will drag them into the water. I've stopped it many times already. Whenever it tried to pull the children away, I shouted and drove it back. If I hadn't done that, your descendants would have drowned long ago." The children it was talking about were Ant 5's grandchildren. To this day, his relatives still don't know how to deal with the old spirit. According to them, it is too powerful. Even spiritual masters have been unable to remove it, so they continue relying on the child spirit to keep watch and prevent the old spirit from harming the children. At this point, some people might wonder why they don't simply cut down the coconut tree. According to the family, both spirits live there. If the tree were removed, the child spirit would lose its home and would no longer be able to protect them. That's the end of the stories from his hometown in Bac Lieu. Now we move on to what happened after he moved to Can Tho. When he first arrived in Can Tho for university, his first boarding room was located in Alley 216 on 3 Halves Street. Before enrollment, he and 3 friends spent an entire day searching for a room. From 8 in the morning until evening, they still couldn't find anything suitable. Finally, after searching almost all day, they discovered a room they liked and rented it. Although the room was intended for 4 people, only he and 1 friend moved in during the first month. The other two had not arrived yet. Because only 2 people lived there, the room felt very empty. It was quite spacious, which somehow made it feel even creepier. One night, his roommate stayed over at another friend's place because heavy rain prevented him from returning. That night, he was alone. The rain poured down heavily. Thunder crashed continuously. He felt extremely frightened. Around 11 o'clock, while lying under a blanket on the loft, he couldn't sleep. The combination of the storm and his fear of ghosts kept him awake. As he stared around the room, he suddenly heard knocking at the door downstairs. At first, he thought his roommate had returned. He called out. Nobody answered. He phoned his friend and learned that the friend was still elsewhere and hadn't come back. Now he was terrified. He turned on all the lights and began chanting Buddhist prayers. As he sat there with his eyes closed, he felt an overwhelming urge to open them. When he finally did, he looked around the room. Then he glanced toward the window. A white figure suddenly flashed past at incredible speed. His heart nearly stopped. Quietly, he prayed, "I came here from far away to study. If there are any local spirits or guardians here, please protect me. Don't frighten me." After that, he continued chanting. At some point, exhaustion overcame him and he fell asleep. The next morning, his roommate returned. After hearing the story, the friend never left him alone at night in that room again. About a month later, the other 2 friends finally moved in. However, after only a few weeks, conflicts began to arise. The 4 friends split into 2 groups. The other 2 moved out and found another place. After that, he and his remaining roommate continued moving from one rental room to another. They never stayed anywhere for very long. Usually after 15 days or a month, they would move again because they felt the place wasn't suitable. About a year later, the 2 of them decided to rent a room in Alley 102 on 3 Half Street. The day they went to see the room, he was extremely busy. He only looked around briefly before paying a deposit. After moving in, he discovered something unsettling. To the left of the room was a fish pond. To the right was another row of houses. Directly in front was yet another pond and a very new tomb house. The moment he saw it, he felt uneasy. The path leading from the room to the entrance gate was also strange. Beyond the gate was a stretch of land filled with banana trees extending for about 30 meters. Right beside the entrance stood a huge bamboo grove. He said that despite having lived in Can Tho for years, he never imagined that hidden inside an alley connected to a major road could be such an isolated area. For the first few days, nothing happened. Then one night, after finishing a part-time job at around 2 in the morning, he returned to the boarding house. Because he often worked late, he wasn't as easily frightened anymore. As he parked his motorcycle near the gate, he suddenly saw a white figure dart out from the bamboo grove. He panicked, leaving his motorcycle outside. He ran straight into his room while shouting. He then dragged his roommate outside to check. There was nothing there. A few days later, before he had recovered from the fright, his roommate went back to his hometown. Once again, he found himself alone. Around midnight, he still couldn't sleep. He turned on every light in the room and lay there scrolling through his phone. Then he heard knocking. He also heard footsteps outside the door. At first, he thought someone from a neighboring room had opened their door, but when he checked, nobody was there. 5 minutes later, the knocking and footsteps became louder and louder. Even though he was terrified, He climbed up to the loft and grabbed a picture of Guanyin that he had brought with him. He hung it in the middle of the room. Then he sat beneath it. At some point, he unknowingly fell asleep. The next morning, his roommate returned. After hearing what had happened, the roommate told him something shocking. The night he had seen the white figure near the bamboo grove. After dropping him off for work, the roommate had returned to the room. While entering, he also saw the same white figure. According to him, it moved from near the tomb house and disappeared again. Because that roommate was very brave, he never paid much attention to it. Eventually, after about a year, the two friends chose different paths. The roommate dropped out of school and moved to Saigon to build a career. Now living alone, he wanted a cheaper room farther from the city center. So he rented another room in an alley off Tran Hung Dao Street in Kai Rang District. This was a large self-managed rental complex with over 100 rooms. Many rows of boarding houses stretched throughout the area. His room was located in the middle section. The alley leading into the complex was a dead-end road, only about 250 meters long. However, there was something unusual at the entrance. Beside the road stood a large tomb. Next to it was a dense bamboo grove. There were also two graves built directly beside the road. Just beyond them stood a small house. In front of that house was another tomb. It almost looked as though the grave had been built inside the property itself. When entering the alley, the graves were impossible to miss. But when leaving the boarding house, they were hidden from view. He admitted that he was the type of person who rented a place as long as it seemed acceptable. He rarely paid attention to the surroundings. He rented the very first room in the complex. About a month after moving in, he discovered a talisman hidden inside the room's door. From then on, he began experiencing strange things repeatedly. Many nights he lay curled up in bed staring at the window because he was too afraid to sleep. Almost every night he heard unexplained noises, knocking, footsteps, various sounds. But he became so accustomed to them that he hardly mentioned them anymore. One day, a nearby tenant moved away. Among the things they left behind was a large calendar featuring an image of Guanyin. They had thrown it into the trash. He picked it up. He carefully cut out the image and brought it back to his room. He treated it as if he were inviting Guanyin into his home. Every day, he burned incense and prayed. Remarkably, from the day he brought that image into the room, the disturbances stopped. He no longer felt frightened. Several months later, one of his friends also rented a room in the same complex. That friend stayed at the far end of the row. Everything was normal until one day a funeral took place nearby. The deceased came from another area, but the burial ceremony was held close to the rental complex. Only then did they discover something they had never noticed before. Behind the wall next to the boarding house was actually a large family cemetery. The entrance gate had always remained closed, so they never realized what was inside. On the day of the funeral, when the gate was opened to bring in the coffin, they finally saw the truth. The cemetery and their rental area were separated by only a single wall. After learning this, his friend also began experiencing strange disturbances. Just like him, the friend eventually brought home pictures of Guanyin and Buddha for protection. As for him, sometime later, he found work near the city center and moved again. Since then, he has continued living peacefully. And yes, he took the picture of Guanyin with him when he left. The old room still has tenants today. However, According to what he heard, ownership of that rental complex changed 4 times in only 2 months. One day, the former manager called him. She asked, "When you lived here, were you ever frightened by anything strange?" Then she explained, "I don't know why, but recently many tenants have complained about seeing things and being scared." After hearing that, he told her everything he had experienced there. He also suggested, maybe you should remove the talisman hidden inside the door and the one attached outside. See if anything changes. After that conversation, he never heard from her again, since he specifically mentioned the alley number. The storyteller chose not to repeat it publicly. After all, from the perspective of renters, nobody wants to discover they have unknowingly moved into a place with such stories attached to it. The lesson he took from all of this was simple. Before renting a house or a room, it's worth taking the time to learn about the surrounding area and its history. That way, you can choose a place that feels safer and more comfortable. And that concludes today's 3 stories, centered around the life of a student from Bac Lieu, who later moved to Can Tho to study and work. If you finish listening, don't forget to like and subscribe, and look forward to the next story.